Okay, Logan, welcome to the Profit Podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. Right. Yeah. Well, as I was just saying before we hit record there, you were highly recommended from somebody who came and did your course, who's a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, and he said you have to have this person on. So I'm really looking forward to chatting to you about all things PT. But before we get into some topics, if you go through a little bit about your background, where you started, and right up to what you're doing now.
Sure. I think that's actually always a fair thing to start with because one of the things I say when I'm teaching a course is I'm going to speak to you through my experience and I'm going to try to share examples of things that have worked for me. And that doesn't mean I'm right and you're wrong. It's just this is my lens. So, yeah, I think that's probably a good way to start.
Cool.
I think what's relevant is I was an athlete. I started playing soccer at about age 5. And so my first time stepping into the gym was because my coaches told me if you want to get a little bigger, a little stronger, prevent injury, if you want to take your career to the next level, you should get a little bit stronger. So I kind of started off in the gym, sort of selfishly trying to improve my own athletic career. And for all intents and purposes, that worked quite well. I played soccer for 20 plus years. I went as far as playing varsity and had a brief stint over in the UK and had a really great soccer career. In part because I maybe was one of the few people at that time. I'm old now. Who kind of took that seriously, getting stronger, making sure that
Mm.
we were going to be better prepared to do the sport was sort of my first foray into that, and that's sort of where I think maybe it queued up my second career, which ended up being in fitness. So let's say I'm in my early 20s and I'm now shifting lenses. I'm not going to play soccer quite so much anymore. What the heck am I going to do? I worked at a bookstore for a while, honestly, which was a great job. But that led me to get into fitness classes. So I was teaching yoga, and I was teaching spin, and I was teaching that barbell class where you do squats to the beat of the music. And that was, I think, because I missed that team element
Uh-huh.
of being a I should say footballer for you, shouldn't I? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
football
I got
only.
into that's right. I got into group fitness and really personal training almost happened by accident. As a couple of my spin participants said, "Look, our legs are torched. What do we do for our arms?" And so I said, "Okay, well, I'll show you what I know." I took them out on the gym floor and we did some bicep curls and some, dumbbell chest press. And I thought that was it. I've showed you what you need to know. Now you're going to be fine. But they kept wanting to come back because for some reason they like doing it with me better than trying to do it on their own. And so for a while I got paid in grocery store gift cards and Starbucks gift cards because this isn't my job. This is just this thing I'm helping you do. And one day, Paul, I actually realized I think I'm getting paid more in gift cards than I am, at my bookstore job. What the heck is this all about? So I sort of switched gears. And I thought, well, let me give this a go, kind of charging money for it. Let's see what happens. That was a long time ago now, but it was just sort of the industry was growing at the time. Becoming a certified trainer became a thing, so I went and did that, and then different modality courses came out, so I started doing that, and another 20 plus years later, here I am teaching some of those courses that I was excited to see come out in the first place. And I think it was just a function of the industry became more legitimate over time, and I happened to be right at the crest where that was possible, and taking a sort of job in my 20s where I got to wear running shoes every day and sort of turning that into a career that's allowed me to sort of really enjoy myself and impact people really positively. And so now here we are. So yeah, from personal training to sort of a little more leadership inside the gyms to running my own studio to doing stuff in physical therapy and older adult fitness to doing stuff for kids to doing stuff with athletes to coming back to commercial fitness. I've done a little bit of everything over a couple of decades, and it's been awesome. It's been fun. I think that's what I like about it. Is there's so many different ways to do it. There's always something new to learn. I never got bored, and
Yep.
I still feel like I'm learning. So it's been awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that. That's a really interesting journey. And I was listening there thinking, this is almost identical to mine. And all the
All
things you
right.
were describing, because I'm 20 years plus now in the industry, and a lot of the things you were describing there is the same thing sort of process I went through. And some of it's almost accidental, if you know what I mean. I was just enjoying myself and trying things and learning, and like you said, the industry was coming up at the time and all these courses were coming out, and it was exciting and it was fun. Do you think that's changed for a new PT coming in fresh now with the industry more established, do you think that now people are kind of, because
Yeah, you know what?
yeah,
That's a good question. And I do think it's changed because I'll give you an example. If a course came out, it was new, no one had ever really seen it before. It was
yes,
one of its it was one of a kind, so I would take it. Now, some of the questions that people reach out and ask me is they're like, okay, I'm considering taking a course that's geared around corrective exercise. Out of these six, which one should I do? So
yes,
there's definitely some differences because now you're able to get into, you get your basic certification and that body offers a bunch of stuff. But
mm,
once you're certified, you realize, well, I could stay with that body or I could switch to this other one, or I could do this independent thing by this person who does one thing really, really well, right? So there's definitely a lot of options out there. And
mm,
while that can be great because you can be learning from
yeah,
inside someone's presentation that's a great fit for you, it can also be a little bit overwhelming, right? How do you know what to take? How much do you need to take? Sort of what speed do you do it at? How many courses do you take in a year versus when should you take a course and kind of pause and implement what you've learned and struggle through it a little bit before you go add the next thing? So it's great to see, but I think it also can feel a little bit overwhelming, right?
yeah. There's so much more choice now, which, like you said, is such a positive thing, but it can be too much choice sometimes, and people get frozen. Um, so tell us a little bit about the things that you do now, what you teach now. Go into that a little bit, and then we can pull out some questions from that, I think. So,
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the director of education for the Pain-Free Performance Specialist certification. And that's a certification that Dr. John Russin put together. I think officially sort of called it a certification in 2019.
mhm,
And so basically, what we're doing is we're trying to systemize human movement screening so that trainers can sort of look at movement, understand how their clients are able to move, see areas where it might not be safe to do something super heavy or super deep, figure out some of the ways that we can help them reach their goals based on what they're capable of right now. And then also, use a really intelligent training system to move them forward. So arguably it's designed to sort of be the cert you take after you get your PT certification, right? You've jumped
that's
through the hoop,
interesting. Yeah,
you did the cardiovascular this and that and the macro calculation stuff, and you answered all the multiple choice questions, and now you're like, okay, now I'm actually training people and I'm struggling. So it's a really cool blend of reviewing John's training system, which he used with hundreds of athletes, thousands of Gen Pop people. It's really sort of organizing a lot of stuff you've seen before into a really usable system. So it takes away some of that overwhelm. Like there's a million exercises. Which one do I pick?
mm,
We're sort of trying to make it really easy to implement. And then at the same time, we find that a lot of veteran trainers who are coming back, let's say, hey, I need some CECs. I've been following John for a while. Let's check out this course.
mm,
We find they come and they're like, you know what, there's definitely a couple things I learned that are new, but also like this just reminded me of really important things that maybe I've forgotten to implement, or this helped me organize myself in a way where I feel like I have a really replicatable system that's dependable, right?
yeah, yeah,
So that very much feels like it. And then we just do a ton of practical, right? So there's a lecture, but then we get on the floor and we assess movement and we get into coaching movement. We talk about how do I cue this and what am I looking for? And if this doesn't work, what do I try? And we've got some physical therapists on our team that are actually strong guys who lift, or really smart, athletic females who run and do stuff. And so we've got this way of bringing kind of the heavier science into, but like this is the person in front of you, and this is what they need. This is what they
mm,
can do. Here's how you move them forward. So we're really in the business of sort of saying meet them where they're at and help
yeah.
them get where they want to go safely, intelligently, have some fun while you're doing it, right? Kind of that human
Yeah.
element that sometimes is missing from when we talk about pain sometimes.
Yeah, it's not really a nice topic to talk about, is it? So you've got to have a bit of humor and a bit of a bit of something interesting to say and a nice way to deliver it. I like what you said there about it's kind of the next course after you've done your PT qualification. And it sounds like it's been a big part of not just your PT career, but you football career. I'm going to say football. Your football
Go ahead.
career was being pain free, right? Because if the clients are in pain and they can't move properly and they're injured, what we do with them in the gym isn't going to be effective anyway. So it is a course really that people should do early on in their PT career. If you can go, right, I'm going to dedicate some time to getting good at movement screens and setting up exercises off the back of that, so important to do.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll just add one thing, if you don't mind, to that,
Yeah.
because there are a lot of courses that do movement screens, right? But some of them feel weird, right? Like I'll give you an example. I was running a PT school for a handful of years, and we had to teach the screens that came inside of that certification. For all intents and purposes, a great certification. I'm not here to say, oh, that was stupid. But the screens are set up in a way where it's like, but I don't move that way. So let's say you're a brand new client and you're walking into the gym for, the first time to do a PT session. Maybe you've done a handful of group fitness classes. Maybe you remember some PE from high school or whatever. But you walk in and your very first experience with this trainer is like, hey, how are you? Thanks for coming in today. What's your goal? Lose 10 pounds. Okay, cool. Let's get out on the gym floor and move. And then the trainer says, okay, set your body up exactly like this and now move, right? Like I'm doing a screen. And it's just this really weird experience where it's like, well, that's not how I would do that movement. Why does this feel so awkward? Of course, I'm not moving comfortably. You've put my body in a position that I would never use. And then we, quote unquote, gather all this data about what we see as a result of that position. And then we make a lot of choices about how we're going to train someone because of what we've seen in this kind of awkward position. So there, like it's correct. And it also creates a bit of a weird experience, right? Because let's say you've been in a group class and they've said, okay, put your feet here and do this. And then you go meet this trainer for the first time and they're kind of saying the opposite. Like it's odd, right? So at least from that perspective, where we're trying to come at helping newer trainers get into this intelligent training system is like, but make it feel like a training session. Right? You need to gather information, but you're allowing that client to take you for a test drive, right?
Yeah.
You don't buy a car sight unseen and go, oh, it's going to be fantastic. Let me drop all this money on this thing.
Yeah.
No, you sit in the front seat and you adjust the seat and you take it out on the road and you want to see what it feels like. Well, if we're providing a scary, medical, ground-based, slow, boring test drive, then people aren't going to allow us to do what we actually do, right? So the real difference, I think, is trying to find that balance between I need to gather some information, I want to keep you safe, and I need to give you a cool experience so that you actually know what it would be like to train with me. And I think we've done a really good job of finding that sweet spot and can make a really big difference to your ability to get more yeses the first time people meet you. And they have more comfort moving into the system because they already feel like, yeah, I would come back and do more of this. This was great.
Nice. And it meets more of their expectations of what they're probably going to be doing. I really like that. Can you give us an example of one way you would do that? So taking a screen in inverted commas and turning it into a fun experience for a client.
Yeah, well, so let's say the programming is based off what we call our 6 foundational movement patterns. So we go squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, and carry. So each of those movements has a screen, and we're going to try to use that screen in the initial session with the client. So for example, the squat screen, I'm going to go ahead and say to the client, hey, let's do a set of squat. We're done our core stuff. At this point, we've done our dead bug and our glute bridge and our bird dog and our side plank and all that stuff, right? So we've assessed developmental positions and core first. They're warm, they're moving. Great. Now let's get into, the next block of the workout. So we say we're going to start off with a set of squats. Go ahead and take a comfortable stance. Bring your hands out in front. So we're kind of in like this goblet position, but holding on to our own hands. And then go ahead and let's try 10 repetitions. So we're using a body weight squat, right? But one of the main differences that we say is take a comfortable position for you. So instead of saying feet hip width apart, toes pointing straight forward, your knees must get to parallel with the ground. We're just saying like, show me what you can do. And so we'll basically be looking for, is it good enough? Can we train it in some way? And we're looking at that around, are they able to maintain a neutral spine? So we're looking for whether or not they have that really big back arch. We're looking for if they go really, really low and sort of scoop the butt under at the bottom. So if they can avoid doing either of those things, then good job. They've maintained a neutral spine. And the other thing we're looking for is we just call it manage unwanted rotation. So on rotation at the feet would be the ankles, collapsing, pronating. Unwanted rotation at the knees would be if the knees fall inwards. or if they make choice to line their toes up parallel, but then they push their knees out really, really wide, that's a choice, but that's still unwanted rotation, right? And then at the hips, does it, tilt forward? Does it shift sideways? So we're looking for those things in our screens. Manage neutral spine and check for unwanted rotation. If it's good enough, then we go train. And in this case, what it means is like, hey, great job in that first set. How did that feel? Good? Okay, cool. I'm going to add a weight for the second round. Go ahead and hold this dumbbell or this kettlebell right here in front. Let's go ahead and do another set of 10. Now, one of the things that we know that does, if we put a weight in the front, if their core is not quite strong enough, a weight in the front is going to increase that core activation. And so we might actually see that helps kind of eliminate a little bit of a low back arch. It might help them get a little bit more vertical, right?
Yeah.
So we're looking at the difference between the body weight and the goblet squat, and we get a bunch of information, and the client gets to do 2 sets of 10 of a squat, one with load, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of an example. And then let's say, no, it's not good enough. You know what? When I do that, my hip pinches, or we notice that they're shifting sideways or something. Then we have, in the course anyway, we teach an advanced assessment, and we teach a version of the hip scour test that allows us to really get into what's the bony anatomy that's going to help you set up your squat most successfully. But we have a decision to make in that initial session, Paul, and it's does this make sense for the client right now, right? So let's say they're hip pinches, but their goal is really just to lose some weight. I'm not sure it makes sense to take the time to do the advanced assessment during the test drive. So instead, what I might say is like, okay, well, does it pinch all the way down, or does it only pinch as you get to the bottom? Oh, it only pinches at the bottom. Okay, cool. I'll tell you what, we're only going to go down as far as is pain-free today. And then we'll take a look at that in the future and see if there's some adjustments we can make, or see if there's some stretches we might need or whatever. But for today, let's just go to this depth and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Right. So that's that human element around like what does the client need to experience today in order to trust me, have a good experience to come back, versus, my trainer brain, which is like, I need all the information, but you need to get hired first. And so that's kind of what we mean about like, make a couple intelligent choices, work with what's in front of you, meet them where they're at, and for someone else, it might be that they're coming in to do the advanced squat assessment right away in that first session, in which case, fine, go ahead and do it. But, what they want, what they're here for, that stuff's really important to consider. And I sometimes wonder if new trainers kind of thought about at the end of a session, let's say they get told no. I sometimes wonder, like, do you go back and look at the initial set of questions you asked them? What do they want? What are they here for? What do they want to get out of today? What are their goals? What are their obstacles? Go back and take a look. Did you actually meet them at that request? Or did you kind of get lost in your own, I love knowing stuff and let me teach you what I know and I'm a professional? Like, I get it. That comes from such a good place. But if you didn't meet them where they're at, and if you didn't give them what they want, it doesn't matter if you're right. Right? It's like that thing, you can be right or you can be married. Well, I've switched it. You can be right or you can get hired. And I think there's a lot to be said about like, get hired first, and then you have an opportunity to use all the stuff,
Yeah.
So that first session really has to be sort of that collaboration about what do you need from me and what do I need to give to you in order for us to be able to move forward together.
I'm going to ask you a further question about that then, because I totally agree. I think not just with the exercise and movement side of things, but all aspects of being a PT. Sometimes the coachy questions you'll ask someone, you have to meet the client at their level where they're ready for it. And that's a bit of a judgment thing sometimes. And looking back at 20 years ago, me as a PT, trying to do that, I don't think I'd have been able to do it. I think I'd have just been I wouldn't have known what I didn't know. I'd have been a bit too wrapped up in what I was trying to think of rather than listening to the client and looking at the client and taking that information in and then making a decision. How do you find newer trainers are taking that information in? Are they good with it? Are they still quite struggle to get that concept, or is it quite empowering for them? Do they actually really go, wow, this frees me up a little bit? Because, yeah, what's people's reaction to it?
Yeah, in all fairness, I think it's a little bit of both, right? There's definitely people that are at a level of competence where when you give them that system, they're like, oh my God, thank you so much. Now I can stop doing this crazy brain gym at the same time as trying to run a session because you've simplified it for me. there's 6 phases in the warm up. There's 6 foundational movement patterns. I want to try to run through these 6 screens as a workout, right? So there's definitely people that notice it is a lot easier. But look, there's also the reality that anything you're being presented with that's new, we have our own cognitive stage of learning that does require a ton of thinking at the same time as trying to execute. So one of the things that I sort of try to suggest, especially when someone's new to something like movement screening, is like there's actually a number of skills that go into being able to run this initial session and making it look really easy, right? The first skill is being able to create rapport. So my ability to manage eye contact, tone of voice, body language, asking open-ended questions, actively listening, right? Those things help me build trust, help me build rapport. And we don't want to step out onto the gym floor and start movement screening 37 seconds after we meet the person. Like there has to be a little bit of time where we let them share with us what's important, why they're here, what do they need from us, whatever, right? Yeah. So I don't think you can get so good at movement screening and exercise that you negate the need for rapport. So that's kind of piece number one. Then there's this whole other skill that happens inside that initial conversation, which we always called it motivational interviewing. So there's building rapport, and then there's using that rapport to figure out what, like, why are you here? What do you want? Why is that important to you? How can I help you? Like there's a need to build, I always call it the needs gap. Like, why do you need me? Right? Because if it's just information, you could go to the internet and give that. If it's just accountability, you could find a friend who wants to train at the same time as you and hold each other accountable. So like there's this unique combination of things that I'm going to be able to provide you, including information and accountability, but there's more than that.
There's more,
right?
Yeah.
So motivational interviewing is how do I have you tell me why you need me, essentially, right?
Yes, yeah.
So that's also really important. And no movement screening process, no really good workout is going to generate enough value if it's not tied to something that the client really wants, something that they really need, right? I need to lose weight. My knee is really affecting my ability to engage in my hobbies outside of the gym. I'm sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, whatever it is, right? There's got to be that needs gap. Okay. So those two things come first. And I'm sure you know, and I'm sure you educate a lot around the skill set it takes to get good at those two things. Then the third skill is if I'm running a movement screen, I actually have to be able to see what's happening. Right. And so for example, there's a difference. This one always plagues me. I get told that my movement screens don't look good sometimes because there's a difference between an anterior pelvic tilt and having glutes, right?
Okay.
Just because you have a bit of a bubble butt doesn't mean that your pelvis is tilted forward. Just because you might take a little bit of a narrower stance doesn't mean your knees are falling inward. You know what I mean? So there's actually like, as trainers, there's teaching our eyes to see what's actually happening. And that's a skill, right? I was talking about this with a student in class last weekend because we were trying to figure out in the hinge screen, when are we no longer pushing the hips back? When do we start flexing in the spine? Because that's something we're looking for, right? And so I looked at where she was sitting and I looked at the way she was looking at her client. And I just said to her, I'm like, what are you looking at? And she's like, well, I'm looking at the arch in the low back, because when that flattens out, then that'll be flexion, right? And I was like, ostensibly, but I think that's going to be too late. I think there's going to be flexion happening before you see the natural curve of the low back flatten out, right? So I said, okay, so that's one option. I'll tell you what I look at. Maybe we'll compare and we'll see if that helps. I said, I'm sitting right here, facing sideways with this person. And I'm both watching their butt and I'm also looking at the wall behind their butt. And I'm looking for their butt to be covering more and more and more of the wall behind them. Or maybe they're moving towards the edge of the wall or the edge of the machine they're sitting beside. And I'll tell you what, when that space stops getting smaller, now they're not moving their hips back anymore. That's it. That's the end of the hinge. After that, it's either bend your knees or flex your spine. So like literally if no one's ever told you that before, how do you know? right? Like it's one thing theoretically to understand, yes, I am trying to identify where we start to get into spinal flexion, right? But if you don't have the sense of how to see that happening, then you may or may not actually be able to implement that screen successfully. You may or may not actually be able to cue the person successfully based on that, right? So error detection is a skill that we have to learn, and it's oddly kind of picky, right? Like we have to sort of figure out, how do I do this, and how do I do this for someone who's taller? How do I do it for someone who's overweight? How do I do it for someone who has broad, like, bodies look different, and so then how does that change what movements look like in different bodies, right? So that is a skill. And I think by the time we've practiced, by the time we've seen more bodies move, by the time, instead of looking down at the piece of paper for what errors am I looking for, right? If I have to look down at the paper to go, right, ankles pronate and knees move inward and hip shift, right? When I'm looking down at the paper, I'm not looking at the body that's moving.
Yeah.
So it might even just have to be like learning how to see, memorizing what I'm looking for. Then I can get my eyes back up, and then I can see what I need to see again. So it's a skill set, right? It can be built, but it takes practice. And I think sometimes that's the thing you don't know that you don't know, is how far away are you from actually being able to use the skill in a really bankable kind of way, right?
Hey, it sounds like you guys have done a really good job of putting that into a system, which I think is important for a new trainer to have a structure and a system, first of all, that they like and that they can trust, and then put the hours into actually practicing. Because I'm glad you brought that up, because that was going to be a question I'd asked about. Your eyes definitely get trained to watching people and seeing things faster. I know that when I've mentored other PTs on movement patterns and screenings, they look at it for hours going, I can't see it. Whereas sometimes I would come along and look at it for 30 seconds and say it's there, whatever it was. And I think your eyes just get better over time, and it is just dedicated to the practice. I don't know if you found any shortcuts, but I haven't over the years.
Well, I mean, there's no overnight success shortcut.
Yeah.
I think there are some ways of understanding movement that can certainly help. And one of the things I do like about our system is we talk about a linchpin,
Right.
which is a reoccurring weakness or a reoccurring compensation that someone's going to use over and over and over again. Let's use the low back arch as an example.
Okay.
If someone does that, they're going to do that almost all the time, right? So if their low back arches when they plank, if their ribs pop up, or if their low back comes off the floor in a dead bug, if they flare their ribs or they arch their back in the side plank, they're going to do it again in the squat and the hinge. You're probably going to see it in the push up. You might see it in the rope, right? Like we can certainly start to understand that certain muscles are tight and short. Some of them are lengthened and weaker. And this is now going to mean that movement probably defaults or compensates in this way all the time. So I do think there's a little bit of a shortcut in learning some of those patterns.
Yeah.
Right? The shoulders rounding, the low back arching, there's the feet collapsing. If they collapse, every exercise you're doing on your feet, you're doing it from potentially a slightly weaker position. So there's definitely some patterns. There's some shortcuts from the perspective of once we sort of identify the way in which the body handles movement, it actually becomes a lot easier to see it over and over and over again. But you know what? It does take some time. And one of the things that can be really helpful, I'll throw out a free tip.
Yeah.
If you get your clients permission to film them when they're moving, don't spend a whole hour with the camera trained on them, right? But we might ask if we can film a couple of reps of something from the side, from the front, whatever. And then we can go back and watch that. And we can slow it down, and we can sort of drag up, there's a knee twitch or whatever it is, right? If it comes down to like, how am I supposed to get practice seeing hundreds of people move if I only have 3 clients? Well, then that's potentially a place to start, right? Yeah. And I also think that in the world of helping people online, I think it's a really good opportunity to include video form checks as part of how we're helping clients for that same reason, right? I mean, how am I supposed to know how to help you if I'm not seeing you move? But also, if I get to see you move, especially over time, I might keep all of those videos and then be able to say kind of in month 3, hey, here was your squat 3 months ago and here's where it is now. I know you feel the difference, but hey, also look at the difference. My ability to see that difference is actually one of the skills that I'm trying to develop as a trainer, right? So
Yeah.
I think that can potentially help. You can look at the same person squat 15 times on a video, and that's at least going to bring a little bit of that skill up versus I have to see 15 people in real life. It's going to take me longer to meet those 15 people, right? It's
Yeah.
not exactly the same, as I'm sure you can relate, right? The screen kind of flattened things out a little bit, but let's say that it might be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good tip, especially if people have only got a few clients and they're looking to get more experience. Then yeah, I think that's a perfect way to do it. Um, let's go back to kind of early on in your career, because a lot of our listenership is early doors PTs, people in their first couple of years trying to build a business. And some of the, I wanted to pick your brains on some of the challenges that we get asked a lot about. One of them being sales. You kind of gave us an insight into that before, is that you taught classes. The same as me. Body pump was that barbell workout that you
That's
just
right.
do 10 million squats in and 10 million bench presses.
That's the one.
Yeah, I remember that. But good fun, brilliant fun workouts. But that was where I got my first clients from as well. And that was just because I had 50 people in front of me 5 times a week. And when they got stuck, like your guys did, I was the expert because I was the person they saw all the time and that they liked and trusted. So they tended to ask questions. So, what were your early days like in terms of picking up clients? What was your experience of that? And what did you learn that you pass on to people now?
Yep, that's always a really good topic for sure. Yeah, so I mean, obviously the group class has helped, because there's a rapport piece that's getting
Mm.
built into that, right? It's not just teach classes though; it's say hi to people when they come in. It's learn their names. Maybe it's help them set up their bike or their equipment. So there's an element of teaching classes which is like you're performing. They're seeing you move. You're telling them what to
Yep.
do. The music's pumping, and you're getting a workout in. But there's
You're on
also
you're
this
on
other piece,
stage
which is,
sometimes in the actual class. You have a stage and it is a
yep,
performance. Yeah.
yep, absolutely. But there's also that sort of rapport and service piece, right? I think a lot of times getting someone to say yes, it's just a function of value added touch points.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by that is, let's say you're a trainer, you also have a front desk shift, as an example. That's another way the model will run sometimes.
Yep.
The very first thing you can do to be building your client base is actually just learning people's names, right? So when they walk in the door, they scan in, their name pumps up on the computer, hey, good morning, Gord, how are you? Right? So like getting to know people's names, learning a little bit about them, that's a really good place to start. The crazy thing is you already know a lot of people, you already know a lot of names and who
Mm-hmm.
they are.
Yeah.
So you have to actually consider that those are the people you're drawing your clients from, the people you already know. But if you have to go meet more people, get to know more people, then fine. That's the thing you have to do. But there's a difference between saying, "Hey, Gord, how are you? Hey, did you see Game of Thrones last night? Yeah, I know, right? What a head scratcher." Right? There's a difference between building rapport that way, which doesn't take into consideration what the desired outcome is. The desired outcome is gaining clients, right? If I want to gain clients, therefore I need to communicate in a way that moves me towards that end, right? So instead it's like, hey, Gord, how are you today? Hey, what are you going to do for your workout, right? So when we communicate, I think sometimes we default to sort of how we're comfortable. So if you're a younger trainer, are you only talking to younger people that are your same age? Are you only talking about things that you're comfortable with? Are you talking about fitness, right? And so we used to call it being mayor of the club, right? Like when,
Okay.
let's say you're running for mayor, everybody has to know your name if they're going to vote for you, and they should probably know like at least one thing about what you believe in politically, right? Like, oh yeah, Paul's good. He wants to lower taxes. Like they have to know your name. They have to know something about you. And how do you earn the right to tell somebody something about you?
Yeah.
You gotta know something about them first. Like, so this rule of reciprocity is if I do something for you, you're more likely to do something for me. If I ask you a question and I seek to get to know you, then it's much more likely that you're gonna sort of, oh yeah, and what about you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's ways of communicating that create that opportunity. And I want to be really clear here. These aren't sales tricks. I don't think there's any room in our industry for people who don't actually care about the clients that they're working with. right? This is not something you use so that people sign up with you so that you're busy and you make more money and you can go, I don't know, move to Bali and train online. Like, you've got to care about the people that you work with. So when you're asking about them, you care about the answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you will certainly come to care about people more as you work with them and learn more about them. But that's a really important baseline piece. If you've been going too fast, then you might need to slow down in order to speed up, right? And that slowing down piece is like, ask 3 questions before you say something about yourself, right?
Mm.
And sometimes it might be 3 questions, sometimes it might be 3 months, right? The reality for me with Client Gain, the benefit, if you will, of having worked at the bookstore and taught group classes for a while was I wasn't in as much of a hurry to try to gain clients and get to full time. I had a job, I was doing other stuff, right? So then when I had these interactions with people, it was more just because I was interested in getting to know them. I didn't need anything from them. And that's a much more comfortable place for a lot of people to get in those value added points of contact, right? And so then
Yeah.
it might be, how long you been a member here? What are you working on? And what's your favorite workout? Or what's your favorite day out of your split? How long have you been working on that program? Do you still feel like you're getting the results out of it? What's the biggest pain point that you have? What's the thing you wish you could just push a button and have it done with? Or what do you wish you could get rid of forever? Or, when you see someone coming up from the bench press and they're kind of like rotating their shoulder and like squeezing their shoulder a little bit, you're like, hey, what's going on? What do you think that's about? Or how long has that been happening? Or, what are you doing in your warm up to help with that? Like, it's just, for me, there's really nothing other than ask questions to build that sort of relationship. And then at a certain point, you've earned the right. They will tell you what they need.
Yeah.
Then hopefully you've got a strategy that you can implement, right? But there's a certain degree of patience and authenticity required. You can't rush it. And I
Totally
can tell
agree.
you, Paul, I rushed it in some cases and it felt gross and I didn't like it. So I can see the difference, right, between allowing the relationship to evolve versus like trying to push it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's definitely one of the main things that I would lean on for sure.
Yeah, and I would only add to that. It's counterintuitive that by going like you said, to go fast, sometimes you need to go slow, and people think that that will take too much time to pick clients up, but it's actually the other way. Sometimes the rapport will build fast with some people just because you've actually taken the time to be interested in them. You might get quite an instant click, and they do tell you everything that they're after straight away or within a week, and it doesn't take 3 months. So you will pick clients up quickly, even if you're just genuinely interested. Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said there. Have you got one thing I would want to ask about is, and I'm going to nick that mayor of the club, by the way. I hope you don't mind. I really like that.
Absolutely.
I love that analogy. I'm going to teach that to all my guys as well. Then the one thing that you mentioned was, I find some trainers struggle with the transition between like, hi, did you see Game of Thrones last night? That general interaction to being an expert and somebody who can help them, but still maintaining rapport. I find that's a real sticking point for trainers. So those little questions around like, asking specific questions about their gym visit, asking about their goal, asking about do you find that like, are there any particular questions that work for you there? Do you have to be patient with those, or can you go straight in with those? What's your opinion on those? Because that's quite a tricky
So
little area sometimes.
Sure. Yeah, there's a game I used to play with my students, and we just called it it was just an open-ended question game. And the goal was, I would be the client, would start with one student. I would say, you can ask me as many open-ended questions in a row as you want about anything you want. And the rest of the students, the room is the judge, right? If they judge that the question is inappropriate or awkward, or if you wait too long, if I give you an answer and then you're like desperately trying to think of the next question and you wait too long, anyone in the room can sort of buzz you. And then your turn's over, we go on to the next person. And we basically want to see like, how far can we go, right? Part of why we do that exercise is because I did this when I was a trainer. I actually wrote lists of questions to ask. Right. And I did that because I've always been a note taker. I just remember things better when I write them down. But the thing is, you basically have to change your brain a little bit. You have to become like an interviewer. So we had a student who's one of the things that she did that helped her a lot was actually listening to podcasts. And she didn't care so much about the guest who was answering. She was listening to the interviewer. What questions was the interviewer asking? So you can write a list, you can practice listening to the interviewer, right? But it kind of comes down to like, you probably want to have a bank of questions that you can use. And it's not that every single question has to be about a different topic. It might be that you have to ask about the same thing 3 or 4 times in 3 or 4 slightly different ways, right? We will often notice this in motivational interviewing. If you're saying to someone, what's your fitness goal? They're like, well, I just want to be in shape. That doesn't help us. Okay, well, tell me a little bit about what being in shape would look like for you. Well, I used to be active, and then my job and my family and this, that, whatever. So I just haven't really been exercising much in the last little while. So, I just want to get back into it. Still doesn't help me. All right, well, what are some of the things you used to do that you'd like to get back to doing? Well, I was running all the time. All right, cool. Now we're trying to get somewhere, right? So it's not just having a bunch of questions change topic one after the other. It's actually the ability to sort of reframe and stay patient and sit in it. And so a lot of times I might even walk up to that person who's sort of rotating their shoulder after a bench press. I might know the thing I want to know, which is, what's up with your shoulder? How can I help you? But I might have to ask 5, 6, 7 questions in order to get there, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely an element of it that is just practice, bank a list of, or just practice asking questions. Be able to ask questions about the same thing in multiple ways. And like anything, it's a skill, right? But it's a learned skill, and it's definitely something that if you get past that little bit of discomfort, right? If you get out of your own head about like, oh my God, that's such a stupid question. I can't believe I just asked it. They're going to think I'm a total idiot. Like if you get out of your head in that moment and just stay in the question and be open to the answer and stay open to the person in front of you, it gets easier.
Oh yeah.
But a lot of it, we get in our own way. I think we get in our own way with our discomfort. They're older than me. I'm younger. How do I prove that I'm the expert? Well, what if you didn't have to be? What if they were still the expert themselves and you were able to ask the right question to get them to think about something a little bit differently? That's kind of the way that I have looked at it, is I don't have to know all the answers, but I'm here to sort of walk the road with you, and we'll figure it out together. I know some stuff that may or may not help you, right? But they still have to be willing to do it. They still have to be willing to take it on. So it just changes the nature of the relationship, takes the pressure off of me a little bit.
Great answer. 100% agree with that. And when you were rattling off about 20 questions at one point in the previous conversation, I did think, do you practice writing these down and have a bank of questions? Because I've taught trainers to do the same thing. Write them down. And like you mentioned, language is so important. When you say one word, like what's your fitness goal to somebody, they might use different words. What's your health goal or what's your wellness goal? They might use a different definition of it. And it might just be changing one word, but it makes such a difference to that question in terms of how it resonates with the person and how it lands. Try changing the word and see what happens. And like you said, just be willing to sit there in it for a while. That's really good. I think that'll help people loads with interactions and just those initial rapport building steps and getting to know people. And I totally agree. I think if you're genuinely not interested in people, you probably might need to think about a different industry. It is all about being interested in the people you're serving. One other area that I want your input on, if that's okay, is organization. Have you got any tips, hints on organization for trainers? Because that's another massive area that people just seem like they've got too much to do. They don't manage their diaries well. They start to forget things. And that spills over into their client care, and that can lead to clients leaving, which, as we said, we're trying to get hired here. It doesn't matter how much we know, we've got to serve the client first. What's your advice for new trainers with organization?
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's a big topic.
It is. I'm shuffling through some things, deciding like we could probably do multiple episodes on this topic alone.
Yes.
I will say that I'm a pretty organized person, so this is sort of a natural thing for me.
Okay.
And I think that certainly helped me. I'll put it back to being an athlete. It was like get
Okay.
up at 4:30, eat my breakfast, be in the dressing room by 5, get dressed, practice start, warm up at 5:45 and practice at 6 and first class at 8. And so there was definitely a period of my life where just the sort of the demands on my time forced me to get organized. And when you're busy, when you have a lot going on, I find I'm more productive because I actually don't have any time to waste. So I have to do this right now because it's the only time I have available to do it. And if I don't do it now, it doesn't get done. So that definitely kept me focused. I took 6 classes. I worked. I trained on the field. I trained in the gym. I had my own goalie practices on top of that. I got into a rhythm in university where it was like no minute wasted. I don't think I slept enough, which is not necessarily great for recovering as an athlete, but you can get away with that a little bit in your 20s.
Yeah.
So there's definitely something to think about in that sense. I'll look at it from the perspective of, when I spent about 5 years running clubs, going through sort of the hire, train, develop, and coach trainers perspective, and definitely that's something we would look at when we first hired somebody. I loved it if somebody was available full time, of course, right? Because the more you're available, the more there's a client at any random hour of the day that can get into your schedule. But there's also a benefit to having some other stuff going on, like a part-time job or you're in school for a little bit, because then it sort of forces you to back. Can you hear
We're
me?
back. Yeah, that's cool.
There you go.
I'll edit it out. Don't worry about that. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I was saying there's potentially a benefit to having some other stuff going on, because here I may be kind of slightly off topic because this is about organization, but
No,
bear
go
with
for
me
it.
for a second.
Yeah.
Let's say you're full-time available. You have a handful of clients. You're trying to build your business. It's not a very good impression if clients come to the gym and see you kind of just sitting around on your phone, like hanging out, because then that's just who they think you are, right?
Mm.
So there's an element of organization to this from the perspective of like, let's say you've got a couple clients in the morning, you're hanging out at the gym all day, you're trying to gain more people. It might be better to come in like right when the gym opens. Maybe you don't have a 5 or 6 a.m. client yet, but you're coming in anyways. And then what you're going to do is you want to gain a client in that time. I always used to say, work the times you want to be working, right? So if I come in, let's say I've got a client at 7, but the gym opens at 5. I could come in at 6 and I could be in uniform on the gym floor, like caffeinated, motivated, awake, ready to go. And I'm going to put all of the plates away on the peg. So the 25-pound plates go on the 25-pound peg, and all the dumbbells go on the rack. I even put the logos up, and I want all the equipment exactly like I want a clean, organized, tidy gym. And I'm going to spend 1 hour doing that before my client gets there at 7 a.m. But the goal is a clean gym. That actually matters. Members care about that. But in addition to that, I now have a reason to be around the people that are exercising, right? And so as someone is working out and I'm putting the equipment away, I might even be saying, hey, good morning. How are you? My name's Logan. Great to meet you. What's your name? Right? So I'm using the cleaning up of the gym as an opportunity to meet people, build relationships, ask questions, right? And it's very intentional. I want them to meet me when I'm awake and organized and on point, right? And of course, if they have a question, I'll stop cleaning and help them, right? Or if we build a little bit of a relationship and I'm like, hey, do you come in every morning? Yeah, hey, well, why don't we do a workout together tomorrow? I'll come at 6 a.m. We'll do, what would your workout normally be? Arms? Okay, cool. Well, why don't you let me take you through that tomorrow, right? So there's an element of organization, which is just, again, get clear on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're at the gym all day, but you're not really talking to anybody, you're not really out on the gym floor, you're not really looking like an engaged individual, then that's actually time very poorly spent, because now all the people that walk in the gym past you, kind of half sitting, half lying on the couch, they're sort of looking at you like, oh man, like that's kind of a lazy individual, right? So I think when you think about organization, you got to kind of consider what's the most important work that needs to get done today, right? Because we all have a to-do list that has too much stuff on it. So you take your to-do list and you turn it into a day list. And the today list should have what? Like 3 things on it, maybe. Train this client, spend at least 1 hour on the gym floor cleaning. And while I'm doing that, I want to try to talk to 20 different people. And I want to see if I can get one of those 20 people to come do a workout with me tomorrow. And then I got to write some programs for the clients that have a new phase coming up. Like those are the only 3 things that matter.
Nice.
Right. And we've got to consider that the tasks that we're choosing have to be linked to the desirable outcome. Spending a bunch of time on social media, evidence is not there that that's going to gain us clients, especially not in an in-person business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your 2-hour workout where you're in your grubby clothes and you're grunting and you got your headphones on and you're completely unapproachable, while that's important, as trainers should work out, are you turning that workout into being able to build rapport with people and talk to them and have them come in to train with you? If you are, great. But if you're not, if you're like, oh my God, I just need some me time, I don't know, maybe consider if you should do that at a different gym, right? Or maybe consider if you should leave your headphones off and talk to people while you're doing it. But I think it kind of comes down to like, what do you want? What's your goal, right? The same way we ask a client what their goal is. What's your goal, Paul? You want to gain 3 new clients this month. All right. What do you have to do in order to gain those 3 clients? You're probably going to have to run 10 or 15 consultations. How do I get those 10 or 15 consultations? I'm probably going to have to talk to close to 50, 60 people. All right. So if I've got 30 days and I want to try to get at least one of those clients like early in the month, I got to talk to like 20 people this week. And maybe that means 5 people every day. You know what I mean? Like, so we've got to, what's the point of being organized if we're not prioritized? Because otherwise I could sit there and I could make this beautiful list and color coded, and here's all the things I had to do today. But are those things actually getting me to where I want to be, right? So the same intensity with which we get our clients to pay attention to warming up properly, exercising at the right intensity, checking their food intake, getting enough stress management, right? We have to kind of approach our business in that same way. And I think that goes a long way towards helping us get organized, right? Is first prioritize and then put it in the schedule. And then, and here's an easy one, like just have a book. If you say to a client, I'm going to send you a recipe for that, write it down in the book that you have to send them. So don't make promises and not deliver on them because you're just saying stuff in the air, right? So whether it's make a note on your phone or write it down on the book or whatever. But I think those 2 things kind of stand out for me as being most important. I'll shut up now. How was that?
That's great. I think that was great. It did stay on topic because I think that you're dead right. I think prioritizing leads to better organization and creates pressure. Like you mentioned about having 5 different things on the go. It actually creates more pressure to get more done. Whereas I think some people are scared of that pressure sometimes. And really, it is just a case of going, you could probably do with it. So prioritize the tasks that are going to be needed. You want to stay focused on that day and then get them in the diary and get them done. And I'm a big fan of journaling. I don't know whether you journal as well, but I've done for 20 odd years now. And it just helps set the day to what the priorities are. And like you said, my to-do list, I don't know if it's the same as yours. My to-do list never gets any smaller because you just keep adding bits to it. But that's right. Yeah, that's it. It never goes away. I think people expect it to be fully ticked off, but that's never going to happen, especially if you're progressive. Then you want to prioritize 2 or 3 things that day that are going to get you to where you want to be. And I guess the other thing I'd add to that is if you are a trainer who comes in at 6 in the morning and leaves at 10 at night, and I've been this trainer and I've heard hundreds of trainers tell me this, is that if you don't do that prioritization, you do tend to be the one on the couch watching YouTube, not really getting much done. And then at the end of that day, you feel terrible. the feedback for you personally is, oh, that was a horrible day, because you feel like you've been in somewhere all day and you didn't get anything done, and there's nothing worse than
Yeah.
that. It's a horrible feeling, and if you stack those days up, that can end up as a bit of an emotional state that you get stuck in. So yeah, definitely prioritizing the days, I think, is perfect advice. Logan, I think we've been doing about an hour here, and there's tons of takeaways in it for everyone. I want to thank you for your time today. I think it's been awesome, and I know you're very busy teaching a course in New York this weekend. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. You might even be able to hear the New York traffic out the window here.
And I know you want to get out and do some sightseeing around the city and everything. So thank you so much for your time. I want to just check in one last question before I go. Football team or soccer team? Who's your team?
I should have known.
Be
You
careful.
know
We're
what?
from
I'm
Manchester.
not gonna be embarrassed about it. I'm gonna. Oh, what did you just say?
We're
I can't pick Manchester. I'm gonna
no,
just
which
be
which
honest. The
which
first.
Manchester?
There we go. Okay, I'm gonna be honest. The first jersey I bought when I was a kid was Manchester United,
Yeah,
and
there we go.
at the time most where I had the most time to be watching the games, where I knew all the players' names, that was it. So I wouldn't say I'm a current fan, because I actually just don't really like watching sports. I'd rather participate in anything than watch most things.
Fair play.
But probably somewhere in the bottom of a drawer, there's still a Man U
Well,
jersey somewhere. So let's go with
that'll
that one.
do for me. I'll take that as a good answer and a perfect place to finish.
Right. All right. Awesome. Well,
Right.
you so much, Paul. This was great. I think, as much as the sciencey stuff is awesome, I really think kind of the business mentorship piece, helping trainers sort of figure out how to be able to work with people, I think it's really important. And I don't think people realize that they need to pay attention to it when they get certified. So it's always awesome to meet someone who's on that charge. We need more passionate people in the industry. We need more people showing up to help battle the sedentary and sort of obesity epidemics that we're dealing with. So all of that work that it goes into building a successful business is going to be what changes the world. So it's always nice to meet someone who's focused on that same piece in the industry. So this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Likewise, been a pleasure. Last thing, can you let everybody know where they can find you, your courses, the education pieces you guys do? Where can people find you?
Yeah, of course. Easiest place to find our course list is on the website. So it's getppsc.com. You can find us at Pain Free Training on Instagram. And if you want to connect with me directly, you can find me on Instagram at logan.3dfit.
Awesome. Do you guys come to the UK?
We have. We've done a couple courses in London. I know we were just talking about the 2023 one. I think it might even be me who's coming to the next year. I would love to. I know Justin did the one this year in 2022. We've got a couple assistant coaches over in Europe that sometimes are able to help us out. So, yep, I would be looking for that. And we also have a foundations level 1 course running online at the end of the year. So that's also a good way to sort of get into the system. We always have the whole team come out to teach that one. And it usually comes with a free ticket to a live event the following year. So that's always a good one to take advantage of for anyone who's excited to take a look sooner than later.
Awesome. Well, like I said, a few colleagues of mine have done your courses and recommend it highly. And I'll be looking out for those UK dates, because I always love an in-person course.
Absolutely.
Wherever possible at the minute. So yeah, we'll be looking out for those UK dates. Logan, thanks so much. And
thanks, Paul.
Enjoy New York. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Hello and welcome along to the ProFit podcast for another guest interview episode. I'm your host, Paul Campy. Today I'm solo doing the interview. Matt is otherwise predisposed. And today we've got a top guest for you. This person is an educator teaching injury and pain-free movement. And we really got into some great topics on this. So a lot of technical work around what we see these days in terms of when clients come to the gym, and how to do the movement screening sections as well, and how to not just do the technical part well, but also how to communicate with the clients in such a way that it doesn't feel awkward. They feel like they're having a good gym session, and they aren't feeling like they're unsure on trial for the way that they move. And we also got into a lot of things around being a PT in your first couple of years, organization, how to pick up clients, lots and lots and lots of great advice in this episode. So settle down, check out Logan from 3D Fit. You're going to love this one as much as I did, and enjoy.